You stand at the foot of a pyramid. Blood runs down the stone steps, hot under the sun. The air reeks of iron. Priests slash with obsidian knives. Victims scream, bodies collapse. And above it all, sex and sacrifice merge. Dancers writhe in blood-soaked skins, moans twisting with death cries until you can't tell ecstasy from agony. This isn't myth. This isn't horror fiction. This was the Aztec way. Feeding the gods with blood, unlocking the divine with desire. And what came next was even darker. Welcome to Silent Historian, where history bleeds in the dark. You are not just a viewer, you are the lifeblood of this channel. Type ready if you dare, or leave a like as your silent offering. Either way, your devotion keeps me going, and together, we'll unearth the truths the world tried to bury. The Aztec Empire thrived on the belief that life itself was fragile, always one breath away from collapse. The sun, the rains, the harvest, none of these were guaranteed. Only constant offerings could keep the universe alive. To them, blood was not just fluid. It was cosmic fuel, the very essence that tied mortals to gods. Every drop spilled on the Templo Mayor steps was thought to feed the sun, keeping it from plunging into darkness. But unlike other civilizations, the Aztecs did not stop at sacrifice. They believed that desire, the raw, untamable force of human sexuality, had to be joined with pain. Alone, blood was incomplete. Alone, lust was meaningless. Together, they awakened the gods. In their worldview, the universe demanded not just death, but passion. Not just screams of agony, but cries of ecstasy tangled with them. Imagine the drumming that shook the plazas of Tenochtitlan. Hundreds gathered, their faces painted with lime, their bodies decked in feathers and gold. Captives were dragged up temple stairs, their hearts torn out by obsidian blades, while below the crowd dissolved into frenzied dances, their movements blurring the line between ritual performance and raw coupling. For the Aztecs, it was not debauchery, it was duty. The fusion of sex and blood was their insurance policy against the collapse of the cosmos. One festival embodied this truth more than any other. Tlaquesepeyualesli, the festival of the flayed men. Captives were slain, their skins peeled and worn as sacred garments. But the rites did not end with death. Those cloaked in dripping hides joined in sexual rituals, reenacting the sacrifice of the god Xipe-Totec, the deity who flayed himself to renew the world. The codices depict figures cloaked in human skin, bodies intertwined, convinced that blood and seed together fertilized the earth. To modern eyes, it is monstrous. Even the Spaniards who first witnessed it recoiled in horror, calling it proof of devil worship. Yet to the Aztecs, it was nothing less than cosmic responsibility. A civilization of poets, engineers, and astronomers believed that only by wedding lust to slaughter could the gods be kept alive. And this is where our story begins, not in royal courts or on battlefields, but in a world where divinity was found in the mingling of sex and death. If you think this was the limit of Aztec imagination, you're wrong. The darkest rites were still to come. By the early 1500s, the Aztec Empire ruled central Mexico with a brilliance that dazzled newcomers. From their island capital, Tenochtitlan, canals shimmered under the sun, gardens floated on the lake, and temples rose like mountains of stone. To Spaniards arriving with Cortés, it was breathtaking Venice reborn in the New World. But beneath the beauty ran something darker, a conviction that the world itself teetered on collapse. The Aztecs believed they lived under the fifth sun, an age bought with divine sacrifice. 4 worlds had already died, each destroyed when gods withdrew their favor. Humanity was created from divine blood mixed with maize, and because of that, people owed a debt to the cosmos. Every sunrise was fragile, every harvest precarious. Without offerings, the sun would falter, rains would vanish, and the universe itself would unravel. Imagine the plaza during a festival. Drums thunder, incense clouds the air, and captives climb temple stairs as thousands watch. On the summit, priests drive obsidian blades into living chests, hearts held high to the sun as blood pours down the steps. To us, it's unthinkable. To the Aztecs, it was maintenance, the daily payment to keep creation intact. Chroniclers like Bernal Diaz del Castillo wrote with horror, but codices confirm the central belief. Blood was the engine of the cosmos. War itself was shaped by this need. Flower wars, ritual battles fought with neighboring states were not about territory but about captives. Warriors captured alive were more valuable than those slain in combat, because each body meant another heart for Huitzilopochtli, the sun and war god. To kill was victory, but to deliver a living prisoner was divine service. The sacrifices varied by deity. Tlaloc, the rain god, required children. Their cries were believed to summon storms. And according to the Codex Magliabechiano, their tears were collected as omens of rain. Archaeologists have uncovered child burials near Templo Mayor, tiny skeletons surrounded with figurines of Tlaloc, proof that these accounts were not invention. To the Aztecs, those tears watered the heavens. To Spaniards, it was unbearable cruelty. Xochiquetzal, goddess of love, flowers, and fertility, was honored with festivals of beauty. Participants danced adorned in blossoms, symbolizing creation and abundance. Some chroniclers hinted at symbolic unions, rituals evoking cosmic marriage between gods. Whether these were literal or metaphorical, the message was clear. Fertility required devotion, and desire itself could be made sacred when offered to the gods. The most infamous was Tlacaxapehuilistli, the festival of the flayed men. In March, captives were slain in gladiatorial combat or by heart extraction. Their skins were peeled and worn by priests for days. Archaeological finds in Mexico City, stone carvings of flayed figures beside maize. Masks made from human bone confirm the practice. The symbolism was direct. Just as corn shed its husk to sprout, so too must humans shed flesh to renew the world. To the Spaniards, it was barbarity. To the Mexica, it was logic. Central Mexico's harsh ecology reinforced the belief. Droughts struck without warning. Floods followed seasons of abundance. Crops failed suddenly. To live in such volatility was to believe that only constant vigilance could appease divine powers. Every ritual was insurance. Every offering was a transaction with the gods. And the rituals were never hidden. They took place at the heart of Tenochtitlan, in full public view. Thousands packed the plazas. Smoke stung eyes, drums shook rib cages, chants merged with screams. Hernan Cortés himself wrote that the temple stones seemed permanently black with blood. His words dripped with disgust, but for the Aztecs those stains were wholly visible proof that the gods had been fed. Yet these same ceremonies bred unease. Tributary states, forced to supply captives, saw their children carried off for sacrifice. Allies grew resentful, enemies terrified. And when Spaniards arrived, they seized on these fears. They told neighbors the Aztecs were not guardians of the sun, but butchers of humanity. Modern historians remind us that numbers were exaggerated, sexual elements sometimes distorted, but archaeology leaves no doubt. Sacrifice was central. Blood, tears, and fertility were currency in a cosmic economy. And as the empire expanded, the demands only grew, fueling rituals that would test not just captives, but Aztecs themselves. The Aztec calendar was relentless 18 months, each demanding its own rites. And as the empire expanded, the ceremonies grew more elaborate, more consuming. What had once been simple offerings became spectacles of blood and renewal that tested even the most loyal hearts. Take the festival of Xochiquetzal, goddess of love, flowers, and fertility. For days, the city bloomed with music and color. Young men and women paraded in feathers and garlands. their bodies painted with floral patterns. They danced through plazas, movements graceful, sensual, a living hymn to creation. But beauty alone could not satisfy the gods. At the height of celebration, chosen victims were taken, their throats opened, their blood soaking the same flowers that adorned them. Desire and death fused, ensuring the earth's abundance. Spanish friars described it with disgust. The Aztecs saw it as cosmic truth. Life could not exist without its shadow. Other rites struck deeper, tearing at the very core of family bonds. Tlaloc, the rain god, demanded innocence. Children were led to mountaintop shrines or drowned in Lake Texcoco. Chroniclers noted their tears were collected, because weeping was believed to summon storms. Archaeologists confirm this grim logic. Child burials, adorned with figurines and offerings, discovered near Templo Mayor and high-altitude sanctuaries. To the Aztecs, these small deaths watered the skies. To us, they echo as tragedy. And then there was Toxcatl, the festival of Tezcatlipoca, Lord of Fate. A youth was chosen to impersonate the god for a year. He lived in luxury, worshipped by the people, attended by 4 women who represented divine consorts. He sang, danced, played flutes, and walked the streets as living deity. But the role ended in sacrifice. At the appointed moment, he climbed the pyramid, broke his flutes one by one, and offered his chest to the knife. The Aztecs believed his pleasures made the final cut more potent, the energy released more powerful. Sahagun's Florentine Codex records the ritual with chilling precision. Joy followed by obliteration, scale amplified terror. The dedication of the Great Temple in 1487 was said to have consumed tens of thousands. Chroniclers wrote of lines of captives stretching for miles, hearts ripped out in a grim procession that lasted for days. While modern historians doubt numbers of 80,000, archaeology confirms the enormity. Excavations uncovered the Huitzilopochtli, the great skull rack holding thousands of human heads, displayed as both tribute and warning. Blood grooves carved into temple stairs show sacrifice was not random but engineered for spectacle. The liquid life channeled like irrigation for the gods. To witness such scenes was to feel the city itself pulse. Drums thundered like heartbeats. Incense burned so thick it blurred vision, and the crowd's roar rose and fell with each death. For the commoner, it was reassurance. The gods had been fed. The world would continue. For the warrior, it was pride. Captives had fulfilled their purpose. For the priest, it was proof of power. Life and death bent to their blades. But not all hearts were steady. Chroniclers hint that even Aztec warriors sometimes faltered when confronted with the magnitude of bloodletting. Some priests whispered doubts, wondering if gods truly demanded such extremes. Yet the momentum was unstoppable. The empire was bound by its own cosmic contract. Modern scholars see both exaggeration and truth. Spanish accounts inflated numbers to brand the Aztecs as monstrous, but archaeology strips away denial. Child sacrifices, flayed skins, skull towers, they were real. The sexual elements may have been more symbolic than literal, yet the connection between fertility and blood was undeniable. In the Aztec mind, ecstasy and agony were threads of the same fabric. By the eve of Spanish arrival in 1519, these rituals had reached their zenith. The city stood dazzling, its temples towering, its plazas overflowing with believers. But beneath the feathers, the music, and the flowers, rivers of blood ran. The empire's devotion had become its greatest vulnerability. Neighbors feared it. Spaniards condemned it. And within the ceremonies themselves, cracks began to show, moments when even hardened warriors turned pale. The stage was set for a confrontation unlike any other. An empire that believed it kept the sun alive through sex and sacrifice would soon collide with men who saw only blasphemy. Some Aztec rituals blurred lines between devotion and horror. Others obliterated those lines entirely, The most extreme rites revealed not just a people feeding gods, but a civilization willing to walk into the abyss if it meant the cosmos would continue. Xipe Totec the Flayed One demanded the most grotesque spectacle. Captives fought Aztec warriors in ritual combat armed with feathered clubs, doomed from the start. When they fell, obsidian knives tore their hearts free, and their skins were stripped away. Priests pulled those dripping hides over their own bodies, parading through the city like walking corpses. For 20 days they wore them as flesh decayed, maggots writhing beneath the seams, the stench of rot following them into marketplaces and plazas. Archaeologists at the Templo Mayor uncovered flayed skull masks and stone carvings of skin-shedding figures beside May's confirmation of rites described in codices. Spanish friars claimed the horror went further, that sexual acts were performed by men cloaked in rotting skins, fusing lust with death. Modern scholars argue these reports may reflect exaggeration, born from Christian disgust. Yet even if half of it was true, the image remains staggering. Moans and decay woven together, renewal carved from corruption. Toxcatl brought another kind of intensity. A youth was chosen to impersonate Tezcatlipoca, god of fate. For a year, he lived as a deity, honored with feasts, luxury, and women representing goddesses. He walked through Tenochtitlan adored, his music echoing in every plaza. But when his time ended, he climbed the great temple. One by one he broke his flutes, symbols of fleeting joy, then lay on the sacrificial stone. His heart was cut out as the crowd roared. To the Aztecs, his pleasures had ripened the offering, making his final death release even greater energy. Sahagun's informants described it plainly. Ecstasy turned to blood in the same breath. And then came scale. The dedication of the great temple in 1487 was said to consume tens of thousands of lives over 4 days. Spanish chroniclers boasted of 80,000 victims, an impossible number most historians dismiss. But even conservative estimates 10, maybe 20,000 remain staggering. Excavations uncovered the Huitzilopochtli, the great skull rack, where thousands of heads once leered over the plaza. Grooves carved into temple steps channeled blood downward like irrigation. Engineering turned into theater of death. To the commoner, these spectacles were reassurance. The gods were fed. The sun would rise. To the warrior, they were pride. Captives taken in battle given to the gods. To priests, they were proof of dominion. Life and death themselves obeyed their hands. But to neighbors, they were nightmares. Tributary states saw Tenochtitlan not as protector but predator, feeding endlessly on their youth. Resentment festered. Fear spread. Even within the empire, cracks formed. Chroniclers hint that some warriors balked at mass sacrifices. Priests whispered doubts, wondering whether the gods truly demanded so much. But hesitation was swallowed by drums. Doubt was drowned in chants. Once begun, the rituals could not stop. Modern scholars wrestle with the truth. Spanish sources inflated numbers, added lurid details to justify conquest. Yet archaeology strips away denial. Flayed masks, child burials, skull towers all attest that the Aztecs merged fertility and blood on a scale unmatched in the ancient world. The Spaniards may have embellished, but reality was already dark enough. By the early 1500s, the Aztec ritual machine was running at full force, magnificent, terrifying, unstoppable. Each cut of the obsidian blade, each scream from the temple steps, was meant to stave off apocalypse. Yet those same screams gave enemies fuel. The Empire's cosmic duty became its greatest liability, the very rituals that sustained it painting a target on its heart. The drums still pounded, the knives still rose and fell, but beyond the lakes of Tenochtitlan, enemies gathered, armed not only with steel, but with stories of horror. And soon, those stories would become the sharpest weapon of all. Hernán Cortés marketingtól Tenochtitlan 1519. He expected a crude village. What he found stunned him. A city of canals and temples, shining white under the sun. Floating gardens stretching across the lake. To European eyes, it rivaled Venice, but beauty could not hide the smell. Chroniclers wrote that the air around the great temple reeked of iron and rot, the stones stained black with generations of sacrifice. For Cortés, it was proof he had walked into the devil's throne. The clash of worldviews was instant. To the Aztecs, sacrifice was life. Without blood, the fifth sun would collapse. Without offerings, rain would dry, corn would wither, the universe itself would crumble. To the Spaniards it was blasphemy. Children drowned for rain, men skinned alive to mimic gods, women paired in rituals of fertility while captives bled on the stones. To them it was hell on earth. Cortés understood the power of horror. He carried the images of Tenochtitlan's rites, like weapons sharper than steel. Tales of flayed skins, skull towers, and sexual rites mingled with slaughter spread quickly. Neighbors who had long hated the Aztecs listened. The Tlaxcalans, weary of feeding their sons into flower wars, saw an escape. To them, Spanish swords and Christian banners looked like deliverance. Allies gathered, and the empire's enemies marched at Cortés' side. Together they carried not only cannons and muskets, but stories. Stories of maggots crawling under rotting priestly skins, of children's tears bottled as rain charms, of blood rivers flowing down temple stairs. These tales became justification, fuel for rebellion, and the spine of conquest. Inside the city, devotion did not waver. Even as Spanish steel bit into warriors and disease spread through households, the drums of sacrifice did not fall silent. Captives were still dragged up the great temple. Hearts were still cut out, held aloft to the sky. Priests believed the gods demanded greater offerings in crisis. The more the empire faltered, the more the knives worked. But no obsidian blade could cut smallpox. No chant could drown the thunder of cannon. The rituals that once reassured the people now horrified them. Some whispered doubts. Could gods truly demand so much blood and still abandon them? Yet tradition bound them fast. To stop was to betray the cosmos. To continue was to hasten collapse. By 1521, famine clawed at Tenochtitlan. The siege cut off food, disease ravaged survivors. Still, processions wound through the plazas. Still, sacrifices took place in public, bodies tumbling down blackened stairs. Chroniclers tell of warriors captured by Spaniards, dragged screaming to altars, sacrificed in desperate attempts to win divine favor. For Aztecs, it was cosmic duty. For their enemies, it was evidence of monstrosity. The end was not a single battle, but a suffocation. Cannons tore through walls. Hunger hollowed bellies. Smallpox left corpses piled in the streets. And finally, Spanish soldiers and their allies stormed the city, smashing idols, setting fire to temples, silencing the drums forever. The great temple fell. The blood-stained stones, once holy, became rubble beneath Christian crosses. The Spaniards wasted no time weaponizing the narrative. Reports spoke of 80,000 victims in a single festival, orgiastic rites of sex and blood, pleas from Aztec subjects for salvation. Whether true or not, Europe believed. In Spain, the conquest was framed as holy war, a crusade against demons. The atrocities of empire, enslavement, plunder, disease were excused. After all, had they not destroyed Satan's kingdom? For the Aztecs, the trauma was unbearable. Codices were burned, priests executed, rituals outlawed. Yet memory lingered. Survivors whispered of Xiptotec, of Tezcatlipoca, of the fifth sun's fragility. In hidden corners, old gods were honored under new names, syncretized with saints, their blood offerings replaced with candles and prayers. But the echo of drums remained. collapse was more than conquest. It was the annihilation of a worldview. A people who believed they held the sun in their hands watched it set forever. And as churches rose on temple ruins, the skull racks crumbled, and the obsidian knives rusted, a chapter of humanity closed. But not quietly. Its last notes were screams on temple stairs, hearts lifted to a sky that no longer answered. The Spaniards carried their version of the story back across the ocean. In Europe, the Aztecs became legend not as poets, engineers, or astronomers, but as butchers in feathered headdresses, draped in human skin. The truth, as always, was more complicated. But propaganda had triumphed. Horror had justified conquest. Yet the stones remember. Beneath Mexico City's streets lie child burials, skull masks, flayed effigies. They whisper of devotion that defies comprehension. They testify to a people who believed blood and desire could hold the universe together, and they mark the cost. An empire undone not only by steel and disease, but by its own sacred theater of death. Today, tourists walk the streets of Mexico City with little idea of what lies beneath their feet. Beneath plazas and cathedrals, beneath traffic and neon, the stones of Tenochtitlan still bleed. Excavations at the Templo Mayor reveal child burials, skull racks, flayed masks, carvings of maize beside human hearts. The archaeology strips away centuries of doubt. The Aztecs really did bind fertility, sex, and sacrifice into a single cosmic contract. Yet memory is contested. To Spaniards, the Aztecs were savages, proof that conquest was righteous. To many Mexicans today, they are ancestors, architects of floating gardens, astronomers who mapped the heavens, poets who sang of love and loss. Between these poles lies the truth, a civilization brilliant and brutal, whose vision of the cosmos demanded blood to keep the sun alive. Modern scholars caution against swallowing Spanish accounts whole. Chroniclers inflated numbers, layered orgiastic detail onto rites, painting the Aztecs as demons to sanctify conquest. The figure of 80,000 sacrifices at the Great Temple is almost certainly exaggeration, and lurid claims of sexual chaos may owe as much to European disgust as to Aztec ritual. Yet archaeology refuses to let us soften the picture. Flayed skins, child sacrifices, skull towers, these were not inventions. They were real. The paradox is inescapable. The Aztecs sought to preserve life by taking life. They celebrated fertility through death. They honored beauty by destroying it. In their worldview, this was not cruelty. It was reciprocity, a grim but sacred bargain with the gods. But that same bargain terrified their neighbors, outraged the Spaniards, and hastened their destruction. The collapse of Tenochtitlan was not just a military defeat. It was the shattering of a worldview. Imagine believing your city held the sun in its hands, only to watch it set forever. Imagine building temples to ensure eternity, only to see them toppled in a single generation. The drums of Tenochtitlan fell silent, but the silence itself became a scream across time. And yet, echoes survive. In modern festivals of renewal, in dances of spring, in offerings of flowers and incense, traces of the old rituals linger, transformed, hidden, but alive. Saints have replaced gods, candles replaced blood, but beneath it all lies the same belief, that life is fragile, and only devotion keeps it alive. What remains most haunting is not the gore, but the vision. The Aztecs believed they were guardians of the universe. To fail in devotion was to let the cosmos collapse. To sacrifice was not cruelty, but duty. That sense of responsibility, terrifying in its execution, profound in its intent, still commands awe. History remembers them as monsters or martyrs, depending on the storyteller. But the stones remember differently. They remember the heat of blood, the rhythm of drums, the screams and chants blending into one eternal roar. They remember a people who gave everything: flesh, desire, children, even their own skin to keep the sun burning. And maybe, in their own way, they succeeded. The sun still rises. Maize still grows. Humanity still dances between ecstasy and agony. The Aztecs are gone, but their vision remains etched into our collective memory, that creation and destruction are never far apart, and that even the most brilliant civilizations can vanish in a river of their own devotion. Welcome to Silent Historian. If you've stayed with me until now, you've walked through blood and shadow. You are part of this ritual. Subscribe, share, and keep the fire alive, because what comes next is darker still. The corpse of a king in England that burst inside his coffin, flooding the church with stench, awaits us. Join me, and together we'll uncover what history tried to bury.